Welcome to Season 5 of She Ventures. I am your host, Doria Lavanino. She Ventures is a podcast about women and their work and life pivots. I believe in the power of storytelling. I also believe that if you change one woman's life, you start to change a family or a community. Our mission is to elevate the diverse stories of everyday women in their work. One promise, no mansplaining ever. Sit back, listen, and hit subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us at sheventurespodcast.com. Are you someone who has a passion and feel like you need a roadmap to start living your purpose? If so, today's episode is for you. This woman traded a stable career in healthcare administration to pursue her passion, mentoring girls of color to be workplace ready and willing to believe that they can attain their professional aspirations. The passion to mentor others started in college and continued on while she earned her master's degree. And she would do it at that point, evenings, weekends. And so she knew that it was something really important to her. She landed a full-time job, continued to mentor, continued to work, and then had a pivotal moment when she took action and applied to a highly competitive residency at the Yale University Broad School of Leadership. And she said to herself, as I understand it, that if she got in, because according to her statistics, 2% of women of color get into this program, that it was a sign that she was meant to do what she felt passionate about, which is mentoring women of color. Fast forward, she got into the program. She started a nonprofit, which is called Love, Ladies of Virtue. And she is here to tell us about her journey and the fact that Love, as an organization, has mentored more than 1,000 girls in its 10 years of existence. Jamila Trimuel, welcome to She Ventures.
Thank you so much for having me.
This was the longest intro I think I've ever done, but I felt there was so much to cover. My goodness. I wanted to start by talking a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, and is there a specific memory that stands out for you?
Yeah, anytime I think about my childhood, I have to start with one of my memories of my dad. My dad used to always say, you're an African girl, you can do anything you put your mind to. And that was something he just said on an everyday basis when he put me to sleep, when we were in the car driving. And so honestly, I didn't think much of it. I thought all parents, poured into the lives of their kids, said these mantras or these affirmations, and everybody was doing it. And it was not a big deal. But that was just something that stuck with me. And I realized when I was about a junior in high school that unfortunately that's not the case. I had friends who his father was killed through gun violence. I had friends whose moms were in their lives, but just not in a positive way. When I was in high school was one of my first time realizing that having those positive role models in your life can literally change the trajectory of your life. And that's what made me start to mentor in college, because I saw the differences between those who may have had those positive role models, whether it be parents, teachers, mentors, whomever, or those that didn't. And I saw firsthand how their lives took a downward turn.
Did your dad have a college education?
Yes. So my dad, he actually has, at that time when I was in high school, he graduated from the University of Illinois in Chicago. And then later he got his master's from Northwestern in business. So he is a materials engineer and always pushed me towards college. Now, my dad is a first generation college student. So he grew up in, my grandparents, my granddad was working in a factory and my grandma was an administrative assistant. College was like super important for him because he was first generation. So when I was born, it was not an option. You're going to college.
You're going to college. Absolutely. And I love how every day he kind of instilled that confidence in you. And it is incredibly meaningful to have that kind of environment. In a TEDx talk that you gave that's called Make Today Your Saturday, you speak about how, as you said, going to college was never optional for you. And you do speak about some of those different outcomes for many of your peers. Can you provide context for our listeners how this impacted you, like to the core, really, and how it manifested in you wanting to mentor young women?
Yes, as I mentioned, realizing firsthand the differences between those who had positive role models and had those parents and had those teachers and those that didn't, that's what really prompted me to start mentoring when I was a sophomore in college. I went to the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, and so I started mentoring. I was a sophomore. There was a girl there who was a freshman. I also went to schools in the neighborhood to work with the children there. And then after that, I started to become members of other organizations that had a youth component. So like the YMCA, Chicago Urban League, things like that after I graduated from college. And I continued to see some of my mentees continue to struggle in different areas. And so one in particular, there was a mentee who was having a hard time looking for a job. She was about 16 years old. And, I said, I can help you find a job. Just send me your resume and let me send it out. And on her resume, under work experience, there was a bullet point that said, looking for a job. And we know that that doesn't belong on a resume. I took a step back and I said, well, how did this resume get out of her home? And then it was a graded assignment. So it went into the schools as well. And it was graded. But nobody sat down with her to say this is not the proper way to do things. And so there were so many different scenarios like that I saw. But that's what really pushed me towards education. I loved what I was doing at the hospital. I was I was a project leader in the strategy and business development department. And I really enjoyed what I was doing. But as I, mentioned, my passion was working with my mentees in the evenings and weekends. And I will never forget when I was in college, my guest professor said, choose your career based off of what you would do for free. And that's what I was definitely doing for free.
Yeah.
But after seeing so many different situations like that I just explained with my mentee, that's when I realized it was time to switch and pivot to go into the educational industry.
Right. And having the realization, because I believe you got your master's degree in healthcare administration.
Right after undergrad, I went to Rush University and I have a master's in health systems management. And that's what prompted me to then start my career at Northwestern Medicine in the business development and strategic planning department.
What interested you about that?
About healthcare?
Oh, just about that job in particular.
Oh, that job in particular. Well, so when I was in college, in addition to mentoring, I was also volunteering as pretty much like a community organizer for a healthcare grassroots organization.
Yeah.
And we would go out in the community and we would find out that there were people who were being put on house arrest for not paying their medical bills. So we would go to the hospitals and have these signs outside the hospital and say, this hospital is treating these patients wrong.
Right.
So community organizing and being a community activist has been in my blood since college. So I knew that's what interested me about healthcare, because I was a community activist for this healthcare grassroots organization. I was also volunteering at a domestic violence shelter where I would have to go to the emergency rooms to convince women who were battered to come back to our shelter. So I had a lot of exposure in the healthcare system with those two volunteer opportunities. And so that's what interested me in starting my career in healthcare in general. I knew I had a strong business acumen, but because I was volunteering in this healthcare organization, I said, well, how about I combine business with my healthcare volunteer opportunities to try to see if there's a healthcare career that I can tap into. So after graduating from undergrad, I then got my master's at Rush University. And the really cool thing about that master's program was that every summer and every semester, they wanted you to try a different internship. So not just have the same internship for the 2 years of the master's program, but you should have 4 to 6
different
internships.
exposure.
So you can really see what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
So I had tons of internships, and there was one in particular that I really loved, and that was the strategy department. And it was because it was like being an entrepreneur, because you got a chance to say, like, okay, when you're thinking about strategy, you're thinking about this is where we are now in terms of our hospital, but we want to be like the best hospital in the state. So what are our gaps and what are our strategies that we need to get there? So, thinking more strategically, I found myself leaning towards those type of projects. So that's how I ended up realizing that I wanted to go into the strategy department.
I love that because, like so many of us, like I don't talk about myself often, but I tried law school and I dropped out after 5 weeks. Like so many of us, I think, really initially don't. I don't know if it's that we don't know or we don't want to listen to the voice that's telling us or we feel it's not practical. There are so many different reasons, right? And I feel like also just from being a person of faith that everything does happen for a reason. And so,
Oh, absolutely.
Right. The experiences that we have help us build who we are today. And you explain that so eloquently when you're talking about how healthcare exposed you then also to different aspects of education that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. So one of the things that you also spoke about in your TED Talk, and I don't remember the context exactly, but you spoke about the health effects that you experienced. I don't know if this was when you were still working at the hospital. You started to have heart palpitations. You had gained weight. You were eating a lot of processed and fast foods. And I think a lot of people fall into this rut. And I know I have. And so what happened and how did that change?
Yeah, so I think the last part of my story was when I was just talking about how I realized through the mentee who sent me her resume, I wanted to go into the field of education, right? So that's when I ended up deciding to leave Northwestern. Like, my mom said this was like, how you going to leave the job, the good job, right? This was the job where it paid well. You had your benefits. I was working downtown, very convenient. So pivoting was actually a huge deal in my life, but I realized that my passion was more in alignment. It was really, as you mentioned, being a person of faith, I really realized that God was shifting me to a different way. Even though I loved healthcare, my life was being shifted to education. It was becoming very clear for me. And so that's when I applied to the Broad residency, because I had applied to a number of different jobs, like at, other organizations. But this one with the Broad residency was so unique because it was 3 components to it. You got a chance to travel around the country learning about the inequalities of the school systems. You got a chance to get placed in a full-time management career in education, and you received your master's in educational leadership complimentary. And this was a part of the program. But the catch was it was only 2% that was accepted in the country. So most likely you're not going to get in.
Right. Was it 2% women of color or just 2%?
No, just 2% chance of getting in, period.
Okay.
But the people who were accepted were all people of color. Yeah. Oh, well, no, I should not say that. No, there's 2% chance of getting in. There was predominantly people of color, but there were other demographics as well. A white man, a few white women in my cohort. So just so you know, so it was 2% chance of getting in, but the majority of the class, are people of color.
How big was your cohort?
It was about 30 to 35 people are accepted every year. Now, the unique thing about that program is Eli Broad started it, and he's no longer with us. He has since transitioned, and when he transitioned, he gave the program to Yale.
Oh, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, that's the connection with Yale. But
was it in Chicago when you were doing it?
So when I was doing it, I was one of about 3 people it was a class of 35. Only about 2 or 3 of us were from Chicago.
Okay.
So it's a national program. And we met up every quarter in a new city to learn about the inequalities of the school systems.
Okay.
At this point, I had left Northwestern. I was working at Learn Charter School as a senior manager of new schools as well as parent and community engagement. And to answer your question, it's interesting how you shift into this great program. I'm at the time, the high of my life. Like, I got accepted to this 2% chance, and I was accepted. This is a blessing. And then I had a miscarriage, right? And so a late term miscarriage. I was 19 weeks. So just just think, baby shower invites and all of that. And so that's when things really crashed for me. So it was just an interesting time in my life because when you think that all is well and, God really opened up doors and made things happen. And then, on the flip side, you have the most horrendous thing that has happened to you, having this late term miscarriage. And so that's where the depression set in. That's where I started to eat more. And unfortunately, with the job that I was placed in, I also had about a 2-hour commute each way. So I was in the car quite a bit.
Stressful.
So yeah, so that's when I ended up gaining about 50 pounds over the course of that year. So it was really a life transition for me, just dealing with so many different areas and so many things that was going on in my life. So
That is a lot. And do you have any tips for women who go through miscarriage? How did you grieve?
yeah, well, one, I took time off of work. I think so many of us don't do that. We try to work through. I just took my short-term disability. I think we sometimes press through when we shouldn't, when we should take that step back and take that time for ourselves. And so that was number one. Number two, again, really leaning into, I had the support of my husband and friends, but leaning into my faith as well to know that I didn't get this far for him to leave me now, right? And so I continued to just stay prayerful, stay just focused on me, on just healing, on going through that process before I even went back to work. But then three, working out for me was very helpful. And I know that may sound weird,
No, I
but I
found the
found
same
a
thing.
community
Yeah.
I found a gym where it was a true community, where there were other women who were like-minded, who were going through, similar things. Well, not similar in terms of what I may have faced or not, but, working women who were just trying to make it happen. A lot of, when we joined this group, there was a challenge and we all talked about some of the things that we were going through. So there were women who were all walks of life just going through different scenarios. But that actually really helped me tremendously, being around women who you can be transparent with, but also, something about that oxygen flowing in your body. When you can just start to work out and start sweating and start doing activities and it's not feeling like working out, because anything that feels like working out, I don't like doing it. But when I was with the community, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed being with them. And I would look up and now I can run a mile. Look up, now I can run 3 miles without stopping. And so
Yeah.
I was able to do things that I wasn't even thinking about doing before. So that's true. I mean, honestly, that really, really, really helped me. And that's when I lost the weight. When you lose weight and then, you feel better about yourself and buying new clothes.
Oh,
And
yeah.
So it was a combination of everything, but that really helped me think about having a healthier lifestyle, but also a healthier mindset.
I love that. And I really can identify with what you're saying because there's something about exercise and community both that also build your confidence. Like I was the same in my 40s. I returned to the gym like after 25 years. It took a lot for me to go into a gym at all because I was uncomfortable and I knew I was out of shape and I felt like I was going to be judged and I had 3,000 reasons why. But it's interesting that we find our way. We find what works if we are committed to finding it.
So true. Absolutely. And I was committed. I didn't know how to find my way back, but through, all the things that I mentioned, it really, truly, I almost felt even better after, going through that working out process with the community. I felt better coming out of that than I did, even prior to. So, it was definitely a life-changing experience for me.
That's wonderful. And so you did the program for 2 years and you earned a master's degree in education, and that is fully paid for?
Yes, it was through the Broad Educational Leadership and it was fully paid for. And that was something, how if you do vision boards or if you write, certain things that you want in your life, that was actually on my board where I wanted to get another master's, but I didn't want to pay for it because the first master's was very expensive. And so I forgot all about me writing this down until after I graduated from the Broad residency. I happened to find my previous notes from like 8 years before. And that was on there to get a master's in education, but for free. So that was a true blessing.
Oh, absolutely. And so bring us to how you conceptualized and then started Ladies of Virtue. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I started Ladies of Virtue when I was still at Northwestern. As I mentioned, some of the mentees that I had been working with, every time I would go to a different organization, I would have a couple mentees that would come along with me. And so, I just remember it was 2009, actually. Some of the girls, and I had shared with them that I was thinking about starting a mentoring organization, more so as a passion project. So if we were to do a field trip or something, if I were solicit donations, it could be a tax write-off. But I never had in my mind in a million years that I would start an organization that would later employ me as an employee. It was really supposed to be more of a passion project with the girls that I was currently mentoring. So I started in 2009 just putting together the business plan, getting the website, some of the more administrative aspects. And I launched October 1st, 2011. So that was when I was still at Northwestern, again, just, mentoring the girls who I had personally. But when we started in 2011, there were 4 of my mentees who brought 2 girls. So we started with 6 girls. And then the program just kept growing every year.
Right.
And so, yeah, the program just kept growing. So then when I got to the Broad residency program, that program is only 2 years. So after 2 years, you either are employed by the company that you were placed in, or you find a new organization so that you can pursue your career at that point. And they provided us with the business coach. It really was a well-resourced program. They provided us with the business coach. And this was when I had about 6 to 8 months left in the program. And the business coach was like, well, what's your plan A, B, C, and D? We need to start jotting this down and create strategies. And I'll be honest, I did not apply anywhere else. And so that's what, made me realize, because I'm not that type of person. I'm the type of person that would have applied to like 30 jobs to make sure I had one at the end of the program.
Right.
But when I realized that I was not, going hard to try to find this employment opportunity, I knew I didn't want to stay where I currently was. I went back to my husband to say, you know what? I think God is saying, let's see where Ladies of Virtue is going to go. And at that point, we were at about a $40,000 budget, maybe about 25 girls. And so my husband agreed that for 1 year, I could stay focused on Ladies of Virtue just to see, how it will grow. Well, who knows? So maybe I have to go back to the workforce. I just didn't know. We had that conversation, but he gave me 1 year. So that's how I ended up starting Ladies of Virtue and then going full time in 2016.
And it's a nonprofit, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you ended up going full time in 2016. So a couple of things that I take from that is you didn't just jump in at all, which some people do sometimes with startups. They're like, I had this idea and I was ready to go. And that's alarming sometimes, because it's like, wow, especially if you're thinking about, managing your money and all of that. Like, you were very methodical in how you planned for your future. And I really think that is awesome and a great takeaway that you were able, must have been quite a balancing act doing all of that at once. I'm thinking now.
Yeah, I had saved up 6 months of savings, and I don't know if I recommend just saving the 6 months and then just, I actually did just go cold turkey from that standpoint because I wasn't working, anywhere else. But I did have my husband who was very supportive at that time. But looking back, I probably should have worked a part-time job or something. I ended up cashing in my pension because I still had my own personal bills. I still had my student loans. I still had just a few things I needed to do. My husband took care of the household bills, but I still had my own personal bills. So that 6 months went by really fast.
That's what people don't
So
talk
there was
about.
some major,
Yeah,
there were some major sacrifices that I had to make. And I ended up not getting a salary with Ladies of Virtue until towards the end of 2018. So you're thinking, it was really closer to between 2 and 3 years of not getting, a salary. So that was a tough time, I would say. in our marriage, even though I had planned, I almost feel like you can't plan enough. Because I thought I had it, like, I thought back then I was like, oh, I have my 6 months, I have my plan to do this for a year. But it really took about, I would say we started building momentum in that second year. So it took about 2 years, for Ladies of Virtue to go from this unknown, smaller grassroots. We're still small, but we were starting to get partnerships that build more awareness after about the second year of me working full time. That's when I realized, like, okay, we can do this.
This has legs. It's interesting you say that too, because I hear that often is that I think everyone underestimates the amount of time something is going to take. It's so common, and it ends up taking double or triple the time and resources that you have allocated. And I guess that also really tests your passion too. So you obviously had to figure out the funding piece. And I also want to talk about the getting known and the partnerships, because that's, I think, really organic growth. Did you have to learn how to do grant writing, or how does the financial piece of your organization?
Oh yeah, I had to learn everything.
Yeah.
When I tell you, I mean, good thing if you take one of those Gallup Strength Finder surveys, the good thing is my top 5 strengths, one of them is become a lifelong learner, which means that I love like reading books and webinars and all that. That's the good thing that's on my top 5, because I had to learn everything. I knew strategy because remember I was in the strategy department for 8 years. So I knew how to write a business plan. I knew how to set a vision, write strategies, and accomplish those goals. But I didn't know anything about marketing. I didn't know anything about raising money or grants or anything. So those first 2 years, and I continue to walk in this vein of continual learning.
Yeah.
But those first 2 years specifically, I was definitely in everybody's conference, reading everybody's book and everybody's webinars, learning specifically about grant writing. I even hired a grant writer who ended up being fraudulent. So, it's just so many pitfalls, ups and downs, as it relates to entrepreneurship. But absolutely, I took the grant writing classes. I took the program evaluation classes. I took the marketing classes. I took data classes. I networked, all of that to try to do as much as I possibly could to really get Ladies of Virtue to the next level.
Let's talk a little bit about that, the marketing piece and the partnership piece. How did that start to take form in the first year or two?
I would say a couple things. One, we had already had a partnership with Project Management Institute, Chicagoland chapter, back in 2012. So they were one of our very first partners, leaning on them a lot to help create awareness. So our girls ended up starting to speak at their monthly dinners once or twice a year. And that provided us with more exposure because you're speaking in front of 200, of their memberships. That those 200 people are coming from a variety of different industries. So that really helps us as well. Then they put us in the newsletter and so forth. So that got us, laid the groundwork to create more opportunities to speak up and speak out. I would say our most prominent partnership in the city of Chicago started with City Clerk Anna Valencia. She was just such a natural, great partner. She has such a good heart for young women. And I served on one of her committees. And no, the first step was we did a career exploration with her. And she was really impressed with our girls. And she was like, you know what? They're asking better questions than, any career exploration that I've ever had. These are like the best group of girls. They were so prepared. And so from there, she kept inviting us to different opportunities. That really opened up doors because she allowed me to speak at one of her press conferences with Lieutenant Governor at the time, with the CPS CEO at the time. So it's like one person creates the fireworks, and then it's almost like a snowball effect, really, where it starts off as a little snowball. As it rolls down, the hill, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger because that one person believes in you, provides you with more opportunities, and then you do well there, and then they provide you with more opportunities. So you never know the person that's going to get you to that next level. I always tell my girls, how you do one thing is how you do everything, because I could, network with one person and nothing happens. But I put forth the same effort with everybody, and then it ends up coming out the way it has.
what I was going to say too is that, you talk about the snowball, but in a way, I don't feel like you're giving yourself enough credit because you had to have the energy,
Right.
wherewithal. As an introvert, like the idea of networking is kind of exhausting to me. And so you have to be on all the time, right? And you did that.
That's true. And I think I've been trying to share with our girls, think about networking as relationship building too. Because if you look at it from that perspective, it kind of helps a tad because then it's like, oh, okay, I'm not just networking for networking's sake, but this is a really nice person. I would like to get to know her better. And then when you think about it that way, that, it helps to frame how you approach that relationship.
So much more authentically. So
yes.
What ways does love identify and help marginalized girls of color and help them become leaders?
As I was mentoring and getting to know the girls that I was serving personally, one thing I saw was that one, they love to talk to, adults, like after the sessions, or they love to talk to adults and they love to share what was going on in their life. So that's when I realized that mentoring piece was critically important, right? But another thing I noticed was that they were oftentimes very passionate about some issues that were going on in their schools, issues that were going on in their communities. It's almost as though they didn't see themselves as a leader. So they saw everyone else as the leader. But when they looked in the mirror, they didn't necessarily see themselves as a leader. And so that's where I realized that Ladies of Virtue should focus on mentoring and leadership. And so with that in mind, as I mentioned, we started with 6 girls back in 2011, and now we're almost 12 years in, and, we've served thousands of girls and their families. And so we help them through a variety of different ways. So we prepare our girls for leadership in 3 ways: character development, career readiness, and civic engagement. That character development is so critically important because a lot of people don't realize how we got our name. Virtue, by definition, means moral excellence. And so what we're saying is that being a strong leader, you have to have strong character. You have to have a strong character as well. When you're not in the room, what are people saying about you? Can people believe your word? Are you a young woman of integrity? Things of that sort. So we talk to them about that often. In terms of career readiness, helping them prepare for their future careers, exposing them to STEM, exposing them to coding and all these other different opportunities that we have within Ladies of Virtue. And then civic engagement, they work in partnership with other girls in Ladies of Virtue to identify topics that they're passionate about. And then they work to create awareness about that specific topic out in the communities or in their schools. So that's how we prepare our girls for leadership.
I love that. And so a couple of questions stemming from that. How long typically does a young woman stay with you? Because I was thinking about everything that you're saying. And I'm like, these are all really great, not only experiences, but things that one can add to their resume. And so I was wondering, how long do they typically stay?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our Saturday Institute, that's the program where we started with the Saturday Institute. And so many of those girls stay about 3 years into Ladies of Virtue, but many much longer as well. We have girls that have been in our program for 8 years, for 9 years, and we're only almost 12 years in. So definitely there's longevity there. And then we just started going into the schools. We have now 17 program sites. And so in the schools, just depends on how long those schools have partnered with us, but it could be anywhere between that 1 year to about 3 years as well. And so, but on average for our Saturday Institute, we definitely see about 3 years where the girls are in our program. So it's been great seeing them, grow.
So I understand how the schools come into play, and then you must also have corporate partners, I guess, that would agree to hire or mentor these young women as they're learning.
Absolutely. So we definitely have corporate partners. So ComEd is one of our corporate partners, for example, and they will be taking 20 to 30 of our students to their STEM site. And that's to train and expose young girls to the world of STEM. And they're going to be talking to STEM professionals and so forth. So we definitely have corporate partners such as Northwestern. They're still a partner of ours. I used to work there and they stay connected all these years. And then We have so many other partners just throughout the city, PepsiCo Foundation, Bright Star Community Outreach, and so forth.
Do you have any aspirations to have your organization grow nationwide?
Yeah, so that is a part of our longer term strategic plan. So right now we're operating off of our 2022 to 2024 plan, and that's really to hone in on what we're doing in Chicago. We want to really truly focus on building our infrastructure and, building our team, making sure that we have a unified programmatic experience throughout all the sites that we're currently serving in. And then starting 2025 and beyond, then we'll start to seek out other opportunities.
That will be so cool.
So we'll see. More to come.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to see you in New York. That will be exciting.
Yes.
You have mentored, as you said, thousands of women and girls to date. I'm sure each of them hold a very special place in your heart. This is going to be a difficult question, but is there one woman who you think back to and she really, for whatever reason, made an impact on you?
Yeah, and like you mentioned, there's just so many. But I will call out Deidre, who started with us. She was actually one of our first 6 girls in our program, where we helped her, get into college and so forth. She was a first generation college student from the South Side of Chicago. And through just the mentorship that she's been a part of, she actually had 2 mentors in Ladies of Virtue, but one being Faith, who was a doctoral student at the time at Northwestern University. She's now Dr. Faith Somerset, but Williams. But at the time, she was a student.
Mm-hmm.
And Deidre had reached out to her mentor at about her senior year. This was after she had, they had stayed connected throughout the time she was in college, but she reached back out to her specifically in her senior year to let her know that, you know what, I just applied to all of these master's programs and I got denied. She was like, I should have, told you about these programs, told you about these opportunities, but I just applied and I got denied from every single program. And so I need some help. I need some more guidance. And Faith was like, oh my goodness, yes. After you graduate, come to Chicago, I will help you, sort out this next stage in your life. And so what Faith realized after talking to Deidre is that Deidre was not able to connect with her professors to get much needed lab experience. And that happens a lot of times with women of color, is that, professors don't look like them. They don't, not able to build that rapport. So Deidre was not able to get that experience. And that experience sometimes is what you need to get that advanced degree. And so Faith allowed Deidre to volunteer at her lab while she was at Northwestern, because remember, she was a student at that time. So Deidre volunteered in her lab for 2 years. She worked with her in terms of what type of questions to ask during the interview. She worked with her in terms of what to wear and things of that sort. And then Deidre applied again. But this time she applied to PhD programs because her mentor was a student in a doctoral program. And Deidre hadn't thought about getting a PhD because no one in her family graduated from college, let alone a PhD. And so just so proud to say that she had applied to about 3 or 4 programs, got accepted to all of those programs. And now she's about to graduate from her doctoral program in school psychology from Ball State. So I just think that is such, a testament to that exposure, to having someone who looks like you, who's able to build that rapport, bring you into the lab. Some of these things you don't think about, but those are true barriers when you are seeking advanced education. And so that's the power of Ladies of Virtue.
That is really incredible. And as much as I love that, I also at the same time am so infuriated by the idea, and I hear this again and again on the podcast, that if it's venture capital or whatever, it's that if you don't look like a cis white man, that, you just are put in a different category, whether it's intentional or not. It doesn't even matter at this point. It's a big problem, right? What would you say are the biggest misconceptions that you encounter about marginalized women of color? or girls of color?
Yeah, so there's some recent research that shows that Black girls are viewed as needing less nurturing, less support, and less comfort. So, we know that that perception is not reality, but that is a huge misconception that sometimes
Where does
people
that
may
come
have
from?
about Black girls. That's from Georgetown University.
No.
Oh, you're saying just about the
Yes.
quote?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was just going to say that is a huge misconception because sometimes, due to stereotypes, of Black girls or Black women, because we go through so much, it's like, oh, you're so strong. We hear that all the time. I embrace that. Yes, I am a strong Black woman. But at the same time, that doesn't mean I don't need support. It doesn't mean I don't need resources. It doesn't mean I don't need opportunities. And sometimes it equates to you being strong as in you're good. I don't have to worry about you. Let me go focus on someone else. And what's happening because of that, even in Chicago public schools, a lot of people don't even realize that when you look at the stats that say what demographic is the most suspended in the school system, has the highest disciplinary rates in the school system, unfortunately, it's the Black girl. And a lot of people don't realize that. And so instead of just running to discipline, we really do need to focus on what type of care and supports does this demographic, in this case, it's the Black girls, what do we need in order to feel supported and to address the issues that are happening right now? And so that's the biggest misconception, is that, oh, they're good, I don't have to worry about them. And then in the meantime, there's highest, suspension rates, highest disciplinary rates. When you see that in the schools, that also equates to higher juvenile detention. It equates to higher human trafficking rates and so forth. So we don't want girls to be kicked out of school because we know if they are getting kicked out of school and disciplined and all of that in the schools where they're not in school, then they are falling prey to these other areas. And so that's the biggest misconception that we're trying to fight right now, is that a lot of times the media will focus on Black boys, and not to say we don't need that support. Let's focus on everybody, right? Let's focus on everybody who needs the support that they need. But not enough attention is being focused on some of the issues that Black girls are facing. And so that's the biggest misconception, I would say, in the communities.
I'm really glad that you shared that, because I didn't realize that myself. And so that's something now that I definitely will pass on as I can and do what I can. As we wrap up, leadership requires a number of skills, one of which is confidence. How do you instill confidence in the girls that you work with?
I think the biggest thing in terms of instilling confidence is being transparent with them. That's number one. Because sometimes they may look at us and say, oh, you have all this confidence. You're good. This is why I, need so much help, because I see you and you go out there and speak, and I can't speak in front of people. I get nervous. So I'm the strange one, or I'm the weird one. And I'm like, no. I still get very nervous when I go out and talk to people. So I talk to them about how sometimes I sweat through my suit. I talk to them about how I have to practice a million times, because if I don't practice a million times, I'll stumble over my words and I get nervous that way. So I think that's number one, is instilling confidence, is also being transparent, to let them know that, like, I was bullied in 6th grade. That hindered my confidence all the way up until high school. And so just to let them know that we're just like them. I don't have this huge superpower that I was born out of the womb, ready to speak in front of 500 people.
With a microphone.
So that's number one. Right. I wasn't born with the microphone in my hand. So I think that's really number one, just being transparent so that they see, like, oh, okay, so it's a learned skills, not something that I have a deficiency in, or I'm, doing bad at, or anything like that. Okay, she learned how to do it. She's experiencing the same thing I'm experiencing right now. So, okay, I can do this. So now I'm open for you to teach me whatever you have to teach me, because if you just jump right into any workshops or anything like that without really seeing the person behind it, it doesn't connect as well. So that's number one. But then two, just meeting them where they are. We have had girls who are very, like one of my love sisters, Alasia, I had her to speak at an event, and I thought she was going to use notes or what have you. She stood up in front and memorized everything and was speaking from the heart, and it was absolutely perfect. So meeting them where they are in terms of providing opportunities for Alasia to do that. But then there may be someone else. I remember one of my other love sisters at a talent show. She came up to me. She was about, I would say, 9 years old. She came up to me and she said, my mom put me in this talent show. I did not want to be in this talent show. Maybe when I get older, I will participate, but it won't be today. That's what she told me. And I said, you know what? How about we do this? How about we just walk up to the front? I tell people, I tell everybody that's here what you presented, and then we just walk back to our seat. And she said, okay. So we walk up there. I shared her name. I shared this is her artwork. It's in the back. And we ended and we sat down. And afterwards, I came up to her and I said, well, how was that? Because you stood up in front of all those people. It's about 100 people here. And you stood up and you were there and you proudly showed your artwork in your hand. And that was just great. How did you feel? She said, oh, I felt really good. But that was it. That was it. So
that requires so much emotional intelligence on your part. And I think having learned a lot about education and about people, because that would not necessarily come to me, but it's so smart the way that you handled that, because it instilled confidence in her, as you said, where she was at that moment. And it didn't turn it into a shaming experience or, oh, no problem, you don't have to do it, because then anxiety can continue to build as you try to avoid doing things. And I love that. I think we use that on my teenage daughters.
And of course, we have workshops that are, where we have women come in from improv and they do their thing in terms of, speaking from the heart and all of that. So we have those workshops and we have that. But those first two things is where the magic is, in terms of being transparent and then meeting our girls where they are.
Last question before we let listeners know more about where they can find you and about Ladies of Virtue is, for people who are listening to this episode who want to start mentoring, what are proactive steps that they can take to be helpful to others?
I would say number one is this a passion, of yours, so I really identify where your passion lies and then align opportunities with your passion and the capacity that you have. And so sometimes that means, we have these opportunities too, the mentor for a day, where you can pour into a young person, maybe at a speed networking event at an organization's luncheon. Or, if you do have the capacity, we also have, and I'm sure other organizations in the neighborhoods of your listeners as well, we have opportunities where you can mentor for a year, 2 years, 3 years, more longer term opportunities with the girls. And so I really do always say, even for our incoming mentors, look at your capacity, because what you don't want to do for a young person is maybe you got fired up because you heard a podcast or you heard a speech or what have you. Now you sign up and then you're great for 3 months and next thing you know, you've disappeared, and not because of any ill will or any intentional, thing, but sometimes you get busy or sometimes, oh, I have this big work assignment coming up. And what you don't want to do is to slowly disappear from a young girl's life in such a short period of time after setting expectations, because that can do more harm than good. So I always start there in terms of mentoring. But I also try to make a habit of being, even those mentoring moments when I see a young girl just outside, I'm like, hey, how are you doing? Just smiling sometimes could, or even saying a nice word to that young girl, like, oh my goodness, that's beautiful. Or sometimes I see girls in the schools that are not even a part of Ladies of Virtue, but I see them walking around. Hello, how are you doing? Smiling, just being a friendly face can be helpful. I always like to stress those small things you can do, because I think people think that, oh, I have to just mentor for 5 years to be a great mentor. And honestly, it could be you taking out that time for an hour or a day to pour into a young person's life. And that can change that person's life forever as well. So
I love that. If you could tell listeners more about where they can learn about you, about Ladies of Virtue, and what you're doing for this Women's History Month.
Yes. So to learn more about Ladies of Virtue, we have volunteer opportunities, mentoring opportunities. If you would like to donate, some people donate monthly as well. Please go to our website, lovchicago.org. Again, that is lovchicago.org. We would love to have you tap into Ladies of Virtue and everything that we're doing. And then for Women's History Month, we have so many things going on, but I will announce two things. One is our This Black Girl campaign, where in the spirit of our civil rights activists, women's leaders of our past, we are highlighting women and young girls who are alumni or high school seniors of our program who have overcome significant barriers to become successful in their own rights, who are confident and purpose-driven leaders in their own rights. And so we're sharing their stories on social media. We're going to have events throughout the month as well where you get a chance to listen to their stories. But that's really important for us because we want to dispel those misconceptions and share some of the stories that our girls are facing. And then we also have a career readiness luncheon that will happen in a few weeks as well, where we are exposing our love sisters to a variety of different careers. The women in those careers will be participating in a fashion show. So it's going to be nice. And we always like to keep it creative and fun. But lots going on.
Do mentors have to be in the Chicago area or can they be virtual?
So the majority of our opportunities are here in Chicago for mentoring, but we do have other ways to get to support our girls through our Friends of Love Council, for example. We do have a couple members who live outside of Chicago, who live outside the state, really, and they're still able to participate because they are raising, small amounts of money, but when you put everything together, it really helps to support our girls. They're helping to raise money for laptops for our high school seniors and so forth. So they're able to do that virtually. And then we also have a college and beyond success coach, and I believe that can be done virtually as well. But so we have a couple opportunities that are virtual, yes.
Donate, donate, donate. That is always appreciated. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on She Ventures today and telling your story so authentically and sharing so many wonderful tips.
Oh, thank you so much for having me and, looking forward to staying connected with you.
You've been listening to She Ventures. Like what you heard? You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a show.